Since the beginning of time, man has faced the inevitability of pain from disease and injury. Few people were willing to submit to an excruciating operation without a way to control the pain. Many patients preferred to die from their affliction rather than endure the suffering. Doctors themselves were reluctant to perform any type of surgery except the simplest and most unavoidable, amputations and removal of tumors. The best way to deal with the pain of surgery was to do the procedure as quickly as possible. It was often said that the best surgeon was the fastest one. Over the centuries, various substances and methods of anesthesia were tried. The Greeks and Egyptians used narcotics such as opium to relieve pain. Later, mandrake root, another narcotic, became popular. Some patients were given alcohol to drink. Doctors even tried putting pressure on nerves to quell pain. But all of these methods had unpredictable results, harmful side effects, or both. As early as the 13th century, an alchemist discovered a compound of sulfuric acid and alcohol and called it sweet vitriol because of its smell. But no one imagined its use for medical purposes. By 1772, an English chemist, Joseph Priestley, isolated nitrous oxide or laughing gas. Priestley experimented by inhaling the gas himself and found that it gave him a remarkable sense of freedom and lightness in the chest. In 1795, Humphrey Davy, a physician's apprentice in England, also tried nitrous oxide on himself. He discovered that the gas relieved the pain of his toothache, but doctors felt that because it didn't actually cure disease, and some patients reacted badly to it, the gas was just too dangerous. Henry Hill Hickman, an English doctor, discovered in 1824 that animals became insensitive to pain after inhaling carbon dioxide gas. But years of successful experimentation did not convince the medical community that the gas was safe. Mankind was still enduring the agony of surgery without anesthesia. While Davy and Hickman were busy experimenting in England, Crawford Williamson Long was growing up in Danielsville, Georgia. Born in 1815 in northeast Georgia, Long was a quiet, studious boy who loved horses and athletics. When he was 14, he entered Franklin College in Athens, now the University of Georgia. Long graduated at age 19 and returned to Danielsville. After a year of apprenticing in medicine with Dr. George Grant in nearby Jefferson, Long set out on horseback for Lexington, Kentucky. He enrolled in medical school at Transylvania University in 1836. 2 years later, Long transferred to the medical school of the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. After graduating in 1839, he went to New York City. He devoted 18 months to walking the hospitals, where he learned about a variety of diseases and new surgical techniques. Bowing to his father's wishes, Long returned to Georgia in 1841. Just a few years earlier, Georgia had been the land of both the Creek and Cherokee Indian tribes. The state was now home to a little over 500,000 people, scattered throughout small towns and rural areas. At the age of 25, Long bought Dr. Grant's practice in Jefferson, a town of about 500 people 20 miles northwest of Athens. Dr. Long traveled great distances on horseback to reach many of his patients. He had been practicing for only a few months when some townspeople approached him about supplying nitrous oxide for a laughing gas demonstration. The recreational use of nitrous oxide was common in the 19th century. Long himself had experimented with the gas at the University of Pennsylvania. He had no equipment to make it in Jefferson, but he knew that sulfuric ether produced similar results. In fact, ether frolics were as popular as laughing gas demonstrations in some areas of the country. Groups would gather to inhale ether and witness its humorous effects. Soon, Dr. Long and his friends were holding their own ether frolics. He wrote later, "On numerous occasions I have inhaled ether for its exhilarating properties, and would frequently discover bruises or painful spots on my person, which I had received while under the influence of ether. I noticed my friends received falls and bangs, which I believed were sufficient to produce pain on a person not in a state of anesthesia, and on questioning them, they uniformly assured me that they did not feel the least pain from these accidents. Using this logic, Dr. Long suggested to one of his patients that ether would eliminate the pain of removing 2 small neck tumors. James M. Venable, after postponing the surgery several times because of fear of pain, finally allowed Dr. Long to remove one of his tumors on March 30th, 1842. The ether was administered on a towel placed over his nose and mouth. Long charged Venable $2 for the procedure and 25 cents for the ether. Venable later said, "I did not feel the slightest pain from the operation and could not believe the tumor was removed until it was shown to me." Dr. Long became the first person to use anesthesia effectively in a surgical procedure, and medical history was made in Jefferson, Georgia.
I thought there were 2 tumors.
The year 1842 was a momentous one for medicine and for Crawford Long personally. In August, he married Mary Caroline Swain, the daughter of a Jackson County planter. They had 12 children over the course of their nearly 36-year marriage. As Long's family grew, so did his practice. He treated patients with a variety of diseases and illnesses using the limited medical resources of the day and often under very difficult conditions. Many people affectionately called him Dr. Savior because of the free medical care he offered to poor whites and blacks. Over the next few years, Dr. Long used ether several times during surgery and childbirth, but didn't publish the news. Years later, Long himself wrote, "I was anxious before making my publication to try etherization in a sufficient number of cases to fully satisfy my mind that anesthesia was produced by ether and was not the effect of the imagination." In the mid-19th century, many doctors relied on mesmerism, a form of hypnosis, to control the pain of surgery. Unaware of Dr. Long's efforts, they continued to put their faith in this mind-over-matter approach. Then, in 1846, Long and the rest of the country learned about the first public demonstration of ether anesthesia in Boston. A local dentist, Dr. William Morton, administered ether for an operation performed by Dr. John Warren, the removal of a tumor from the neck of a patient at Massachusetts General Hospital. Dr. Charles Jackson, a well-known scientist, also felt he deserved credit for the successful procedure because he had given Morton critical advice about the use of ether. Dr. Horace Wells, a Connecticut dentist, demanded recognition too, because he had been using nitrous oxide for years when he extracted teeth. The 3 men argued and set about to prove their individual claims. Morton and Jackson even attempted to patent their discovery, an effort that eventually failed. The United States Congress got involved and began a debate in 1847 to decide which one of the men should receive an award of $100,000 for the discovery. While the public debate raged, word of the surgical use of anesthesia traveled beyond America. There was praise everywhere, a glorious victory for mankind, the greatest discovery of our century. We have conquered pain. Long's wife, Mary Caroline, urged him to submit a record of his discovery to a medical journal. Finally, in 1849, the Southern Medical and Surgical Journal published his account, including affidavits submitted by witnesses to his surgeries. In April 1853, Dr. Long read his report to the State Medical Society at a meeting in Savannah, Georgia. The organization enthusiastically endorsed his claims. The following year, Dr. Jackson traveled south to visit Dr. Long to try to resolve what had become known as the ether controversy. Long and his family had relocated to Athens following a brief move to Atlanta. The 2 men examined each other's documents and affidavits. Jackson concluded that Long had the advantage of priority in date and in the first use of anesthetic, but he added that he and Dr. Morton had the advantage of priority of publication. In 1863, Congress, after debating the issue for years, finally decided not to award the prize money to anyone. But while the ether controversy simmered, a larger issue was reaching the boiling point. The nation was headed toward war. Dr. Long was 46 when the South seceded from the Union. In the early 1850s, Long had purchased a drugstore with his brother. As the threat of civil war grew, he knew medicine might become scarce. He ordered large quantities of drugs, ether, chloroform, and carbolic acid, to keep on hand. Long was named physician to the University Campus Hospital in Athens, where he treated sick and wounded soldiers and their families. After the Civil War, Dr. Long resumed his regular practice in Athens. His drugstore operation was now the largest in Northeast Georgia. He enjoyed playing cards and raising thoroughbred horses. He owned 2 plantations in the area and was devoted to his wife and children. One night in 1878, he told his family at dinner, "No man ever had better children than I have." The next day, moments after delivering a baby girl, he collapsed from a stroke. He told others in the room, "Care for the mother and child first," and then he died. In 1912, a bronze medallion honoring Dr. Long was unveiled at the University of Pennsylvania, where he attended medical school. The occasion was the 70th anniversary of the first use of surgical ether. At the ceremony, it was noted that Long's greatest discovery was not made in a splendidly equipped institution of worldwide fame, nor by a professor whose lecture room was packed with eager students, but by a modest, unassuming country doctor dwelling in an isolated village. On March 30th, 1926, a statue of Crawford W. Long was dedicated in Statuary Hall in the United States Capitol. Dr. Hugh Young of Johns Hopkins Hospital told the crowd that after Dr. Long's discovery, surgery was delivered from the horrors of pain and infection, and, like an animal freed from a black dungeon of despair, bounded forth into the pure light of science.